All right, so good afternoon, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. Sorry for the little bit of delay. Just had a little hiccup on our end getting connected, but appreciate everybody taking time to get with us today and seeing a lot of familiar names on the list. If we haven't met, if you're new to the association, I'm Chad Mahoney. I'm the president of the Missouri Broadcasters Association. We're here today because, of course, we've all been kind of watching the changes with the automotive dashboard and sure to be more changes. But the good news today is local radio is very much a part of the future of the connected car. I can't think of a better person today to be with us than Juan Galdamez from Xperi. Juan, we appreciate your time today. So why don't we go ahead and get started, and I'll send it over to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Chad. Thank you to everybody for participating, and thanks for having us join you. Pretty excited to have the conversation today and to share what's going on in the vehicle. With that said, I will go ahead and start to share my screen. All right, so we're going to talk today about the connected car. One of the things to kick this off is when I think of the connected car, I'm talking about a vehicle that has an embedded modem or paired internet connection in the car. You bring in your phone to into the vehicle, and it uses that cellular data connection from your mobile device and gives that vehicle connectivity to kind of the outside world, right? It has an internet connection that can then ingest content or whatever it might be. But the whole idea is a connected car, in my reference, and as I think about the connected vehicle, is a vehicle simply that has that internet connectivity inside of the car, whether it's embedded or brought in. The other thing to highlight too is there should be a Q&A bar at the bottom. Feel free along the way. If you have any questions, please pop them in there. I know we can't pop in on video or unmute, but feel free to send your questions along the way, and we can try to answer them in real time and hopefully help others to understand, or maybe others have the same questions that you might have as well. So with that, here we go. So at 9 a.m. yesterday, what did over-the-air listening look like? Where in the market is our listening the strongest? And what did listening look like throughout the day? These are all questions that the connected vehicle can answer for broadcast radio. The point of starting this is to, one, see that there is opportunity with the connected car and when it comes to broadcast radio, that it is not something to be scared of. But when you think about some of these questions and you think about these things, this is actually a really exciting opportunity for radio and an exciting possibility down the road. And we'll talk about some of this as we go further along. Quick overview of who we are. If you're not familiar with Xperi, we've gone through a bunch of changes as a company. A lot of you might be more familiar with us under Ubiquity Digital, which were the original creators of HD radio technology. But we have since morphed into Xperi, doing a bunch of other different technologies for broadcast radio around the world. Today, we're really going to talk a little bit more about AutoStage. But again, most are familiar with HD radio. We do a bunch of stuff around metadata, app connectivity, ecosystem development, things like that, and then management systems and all that kind of sort. But just to give you some context of who we are. Looking at the HD radio side. So we have been doing technology for broadcast, for radio and automotive for over 20 years at this point. HD radio is a matured technology and is deployed across all automotive brands at this point. We've launched over 125 million vehicles with our technologies, and the vast majority of that being HD radio. So the vast majority of what we've been doing has been deploying radio technology into automotive. We work with all automotive brands that are shipping vehicles across North America, as well as the tier 1 suppliers, which are the groups that actually produce the equipment that make the components of radio. It's that kind of whole center stack feature, as you might reference it. But it's not just the individual piece of radio, it's a component of it, but that whole kind of entertainment system. And so we've been working with both of these groups for over 20 years on radio, deployment of radio in the vehicle. And over the last several years, at this point, it's probably been about 6 years or so, conversations started to kind of expand as to what else can radio do? What else can radio deliver? You know, we've got analog radio with RDS. We've been working on HD radio and the deployment of digital radio with all of its other features. And the industry was starting to ask questions on what else can radio do. Connectivity is increasing in the vehicle. What else is there for radio? And so that's what's ultimately led us to what we're doing on the AutoStage side, and leads to some of that opportunity, and where we are very excited about radio's future and where things are going. To kick it off, let's take a look at what radio is looking like in the car today, or more so, where is the car going in the future? And even more narrowly, where is it going next year? Where is the vehicle going in terms of, the dash, content, things like that inside of the car in 2024? The crazy thing about this is actually it's 2024, but we'll actually start seeing these vehicles towards the end of this year. 2024 model year vehicles are, to be honest, some of them are already out on the road today or already at dealers, but we'll be hitting the road on the second half of this year. So they're already here today. This is a Toyota. I believe this is the new 4Runner. I believe this is the 2024 model year vehicle here. But as you can see, the screen here is pretty sizable. It's increased in size from what it might have been a couple years ago. This is, again, 2024 model year, and this is a radio that you'll start to see over time rolled out to even more Toyota vehicles over time. This is a Jeep vehicle. This is, again, even a larger screen, and it's a different orientation here, right? It goes a little bit more, a little wider and not as tall, but a little bit different, and still got a lot of that connectivity. The key thing to keep in mind here, and I'm sure you all are well aware, that these screens are just getting larger. And the importance of that, or how that matters to radio, is these screens are getting put into the dash that have these large displays. And they're not putting these screens inside of the car for the screen to remain empty. They don't just want a frequency or call letters, things like that. They're looking for more content, right? These screens are really focusing the whole in-car experience around the user experience, right? Which traditionally has been around mobile or web, things of that nature. But now it's really becoming about the user experience inside of the car when they're engaging with technology. So as these screens, and as you see the next few as well, you'll see these screens are just getting larger and larger, and we need to make sure that content is filled, and content fills these screens. And for radio, it's super important that we try to fill that screen with as much content that's within reason, and that they want to fill that content, or that they want to fill those screens with. This is one of the new Fords. I think this is the new Ford Mustang screen here. You've got, a whole instrument cluster that's no longer the actual needles going over. It's all digitized, and a screen there, and then a screen in the center. This is a new Subaru for 2024. This screen is fairly consistent what they've had the last couple years. They've gone the vertical approach on this one, but I think this is actually a style that they've adopted for the last few years for Subaru vehicles. We've got a Mazda, and so again, this is that same kind of approach as the Jeep vehicle, where you see, the short but wide screen in the car. This is a new VW radio, and again, I think it's pretty clear as looking at all of these different vehicles that this screen is just getting larger and larger. And each brand also is very different. If you look at what the first Toyota vehicle I showed earlier versus what this BMW here has, or what the Ford had, or what the Jeep had, they're all very different. The only kind of consistent is the increase in size of the screen for each vehicle. This is the Volvo. So this is one of their newer radios that they've started to launch in 2024. And then this is the new GM radio that's using Android Automotive as an operating system. And you can see some of the differences here. Again, the key thing to take away here, one is to not be so concerned with this, right? Or be too worried about what radio looks where radio is going in this place, right? The idea here is that the vehicle and connectivity in the car is opportunity for radio, and these screens and having to deliver content, obviously in a safe way when cars are driving. There's some really exciting things that can be done. And, our approach and where we think things are going for radio, and you'll see in a second, are some really cool things and great things to see. So the competition, I think everybody is also well aware. I know whenever we hear conversations around the vehicle, there's always a lot about all that's going on and who's coming after radio's time in the car. The reality is radio has dominated and still dominates the listening or the share of ear inside of the vehicle, right? The numbers vary depending what research you see, but they're all very consistent with radio being the main entertainment source inside of the car. But truly, that is evolving. And a lot of these technology companies that you see here are actively trying to be that entertainment source inside of the car and to be that dominant source of, whether it be audio or even video over time, of taking over that time inside of the car and how valuable it is. And it is truly a reality that these groups are all looking at that and trying to figure that out. And it's not to scare everyone about this, but it is a reality. It's something that we should be aware of what's going on. But also, to the point, what this should do is motivate us and encourage the industry to make sure that we're delivering the best experience possible. Because, as I mentioned, with these screens getting larger, this world of being able to just send frequency and call letters, or a limited character number of text, isn't something that is going to work for these auto manufacturers over time. These screens need to be populated with content. The experience needs to be great. And a lot of these services are all IP delivered, and they can do a lot of what they're looking for. So that leads us to the opportunity for radio in the car. At Xperi, and I think depending who you talk to in different groups as well, all see, again, connectivity as the opportunity. Broadcast radio paired with the internet inside of the car can really change how listeners engage with radio. And it's typically called a hybrid radio experience, where you're using the over-the-air signal for audio delivery inside of the vehicle, and then you're taking the internet connection inside of the car, and we're bringing them together to make a great experience inside the car. So the key thing here is, again, we're still using the over-the-air AM, FM signal for audio. We're just using the internet to improve the experience inside of the car. And you'll see that in a second as well. Our work around this in this space, when we talk about hybrid radio, is all been around DTS AutoStage. And DTS AutoStage is that hybrid radio approach, or is the approach that we're delivering around the world. DTS AutoStage, we launched it at the end of 2020 into 2021 with Mercedes. The whole goal here, again, is merging broadcast and IP, and to improve on that user experience inside the car, to raise the bar for radio in the car, and to make it a compelling source of entertainment for listeners inside of the vehicle. There's a whole other level of hybrid that we'll talk about in a second, that is, again, the opportunity, but also I think that is really compelling for this use case. And back to this whole idea of something that we should embrace when we talk about connectivity and radio in the car, and that revolves around analytics and metrics inside of the car. On Mercedes, this is what that starts to look like. And I don't think I highlighted a Mercedes earlier, but you'll see what this looks like versus what some of the other pictures of 2024 model years are very different again. But when you get into a Mercedes, there are about 6 to 8 different models right now that offer DTS AutoStage. When you get into your vehicle and you turn on the radio, you go to FM, and you have this carousel of station logos that you're able to cycle through. Now, if you're an analog station, you have no ability to send a station logo to the vehicle. So this is where we use that internet connectivity to deliver that station logo, right? So still use the audio, the broadcast for audio delivery, but use that internet connection to deliver that station logo where analog can't actually deliver that content. If you're broadcasting in HD, you would be able to obviously send a station logo using Artist Experience, and you wouldn't need the internet connection, but it would still be available to fill those gaps where it possibly might be needed. And what this also does, though, is create a consistent experience for radio in the car. It creates a better experience where you're not just seeing logos for HD stations or things like that. You're seeing station logos for every station, and you're having a great, clean experience for radio inside of the car. In addition to station logos, it's also about now playing metadata. And again, if you're an analog radio station, you're not able to actually send over a station logo album art or artist images over the analog part of your broadcast. But that internet connection we can tap into and deliver that functionality. And to, again, just make that an overall better experience for the listeners inside of the car, and to have it an enriched experience with content that aligns with the content that the station is broadcasting over the air. These are launched, as I said, in 6 to 8 different models within Mercedes. I'd highly encourage you to check out a dealership, swing by a dealership at some point and get into a car and play with the radio and see what it looks like. I think you'll see some really exciting stuff. In addition to Mercedes, we also launched with Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. The great thing about this launch and what they're doing is with Mercedes, it has to be a new Mercedes vehicle equipped with the technology. For this launch, this actually went back to up to 2017 model year vehicles. So between Hyundai and Kia alone, it's somewhere between 40 and 50 model years, and is, sorry, one second, there's something in here. I was looking at something. This went back to some 2017 model year vehicles between Hyundai and Kia. So it actually went back to some older vehicles, which is exciting because it improves the number of vehicles, and it's not just only for new vehicles. And it's a large rollout. It's a mainstream brand that has a lot of reach around the country. What you see here is you've got on the right side the now playing information. You've got the now playing information with artwork for the track that's being played. You've got the static information on the artist and title. And then on the left side, you have a station list that is full of metadata for those stations that you could tune to. So instead of having just frequency and call letters, you're now able to see station logos, the name, the slogan for the station, and trying to help add elements to make it a better experience for radio. So it improves discoverability for maybe for listeners who might not be aware of some of the stations, but also just, again, completes that screen. That screen is larger and fills that screen with more content, but then also makes it an overall better experience inside the car. And again, this one was Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. Hyundai and Kia, they're very similar. I think it comes down to color theming and all of that sort. And then Genesis is very similar too. But again, these are launched and live, and I encourage you to go check out a dealership as well. I see. So there is a question from Chad about the lyrics. I'll talk about that in a second. I'll highlight that as well. The other one that we launched with recently, we're not publicly allowed to say who it is, but I think pretty clearly you can see what brand of vehicle this is by these images. And this was the 5th brand that we've launched with. If you're familiar with this brand, the radio used to only show frequency and call letters. You would turn on the radio and it would just have this laundry list of text that just showed frequency and call letters. And at the end of October of last year, they rolled out DTS AutoStage to now populate with station logos. So what you're seeing here on the screen are station logos for all of the radio stations. So again, we're still using broadcast for audio, but using that internet connection to populate the logos so that every station has a logo represented and kind of expands on the radio experience inside of the car. And it's a dramatic difference of the radio inside of this vehicle and what it looks like pre-October to now post-October with the launch. So a lot of exciting things going on there, and we'll add other features and elements over time with this brand and with other brands as well. The other great thing about this is if you see one of these cars on the road, it has DTS AutoStage. This was a global launch for this brand and rolled out to every model of vehicle on the road, except for the original two-door Roadster that they had. But outside of that, which you barely see, I think I only know one person who has one, and I've rarely seen one, so they're very few. But all of the other models will have DTS AutoStage, and their radio would look very similar, will look just like this. We'll have station logos and all of that sort when you tune into the radio in that vehicle. So I've spent the last few minutes talking about the overall experience, the current experience with station logos and now playing metadata and content. That's kind of foundational for radio. That's kind of the baseline, right, of where we want to be with radio in the car. When someone's listening to a song on the radio, we want them to know what song they're listening to. We want them to, have a visual paired with that. Or if they're listening to a station, we want them to have that station logo, have that branding for that station. But the goal here, though, is to not just get to that foundational piece of it, but what else can we do for broadcast radio inside of the car? Now that we've paired the internet connection, what else can we do? And with Mercedes, we've done two major steps we think for radio in the car. One is what we call service following, which is broadcast to stream transition. So you drive your vehicle to the edge of, you get to the edge of broadcast coverage. You're listening over the air. You get to the edge of that coverage. You as the user have the opportunity to switch over to the stream so that you can continue listening to that radio station and not have to lose that station. And then when you're back in broadcast coverage, you'll be able to consume that station over the air, listening to the FM or the AM frequency of that station. The other feature we rolled out, which this came out towards the end of last year, I believe as well, is lyrics to songs on the radio. So when you're listening to a song on the radio, obviously the car is either in park or if it's the rear seat of the vehicle, the user has the opportunity to now see lyrics to songs on the radio. So when you're listening to that song, you could hit a button and you could see the lyrics to what you're listening to on the radio. Now, in some cases, this might be a bit of, how does this help me or is this really that necessary? But this is a use case of the first time ever broadcast radio could deliver a feature like this. Internet delivered services, Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, all of these other services have done this, can do this. But this is the first time over-the-air broadcast radio has ever been able to deliver a feature like this, right? Where we've now maximized that internet connection and taken a huge step forward into the overall experience and the elements that broadcast radio can deliver to the vehicle. Consumers are used to being on their phone and seeing lyrics to, you're listening on Spotify and you can see the lyrics to the song that you're listening to, but they've never been able to see that inside of the car when they're listening to the radio. And this is, I think, pretty groundbreaking or pretty exciting because of that capability and because of how far of a step forward for broadcast radio it is. And again, the idea here is to not just end here, but a whole bunch of other things that we have ideas around. And I'm sure as you're seeing this or thinking about this, there are other ideas that you might have. But what else can we now start to look at? And what else can we deliver when someone's listening to your radio station? Podcasts. We know that your stations are producing more and more podcasts. If you're listening to a morning show and the show's coming to an end, why couldn't the user have the opportunity to maybe listen to yesterday's podcast versus going to another station or listening to something else, going to a streaming service, whatever it might be, but giving them potentially the opportunity to listen to your content, still remain within your world of content versus going somewhere else. If I'm listening to this Luke Combs song, why couldn't I potentially buy tickets to Luke Combs' concert that's coming to town in 2 weeks? Or why couldn't I have a coupon code if I'm listening to the radio and I see an advertiser? Why couldn't I have all of these other sorts of elements to engage with the advertiser? So there are 1,000,001 different ideas and thoughts around what else we can do with broadcast radio in the car. These are all sort of ideas and being worked on and thinking through how we can execute some of these. But lyrics and service following or two features that are live today, and that you can go into a Mercedes vehicle and you can go in and see these features and see these elements inside broadcast radio in the car. And I think this is only just the beginning of where you'll start to see other things coming for broadcast radio inside of the vehicle. And I think, we get excited about the possibility of all sorts of different things when we think about this. Now that we've paired broadcast, now that we've taken the radio in the vehicle and we've paired it with the internet connection, it's really endless as to what we can do for radio inside of the car, and just takes time for development and deployment. But a lot of exciting things, I think, over time to come out. And again, if you get a chance, go into a Mercedes dealership, or if you have one of the vehicles that has it, you'll start to see it, and now you know where it's coming from. So a lot of what I've just talked about was around the in-vehicle experience for your listeners, how they're seeing your stations, how they're engaging with your stations inside of the car. The great thing about the internet connection is it's a two-way communication, whereas as analog radio or HD radio or broadcast in general is just one-way communication, right? We send out a signal, the receiver receives it, and that's it. But that internet connection actually talks back to us. And so with that internet connection, we're able to start now understanding a little bit more about what's going on inside of the vehicle. I pulled up a station in Jefferson City. And so what you're seeing here are the first elements of our first metrics that we've started to release. At the end of March of this year, we rolled out our metrics and insights for DTS AutoStage. So now that we've paired broadcast and IP in the car, and now we have that internet connection, it's now talking back to us more about the over-the-air listening inside of the car. So now we're able to share with stations how many times your station is tuned to on a given day. What is the average listening time or the average session time of those tuning sessions on that given day? And being able to look at some of that data historically and being able to see how your listening is impacted on a daily basis. And maybe being able to attribute some of the changes in the market or different elements that are going on with, drops or, extended listening times in the vehicle. We're delivering them at this point in a 24-hour period. So you're able to see, yesterday's metrics or, as soon as the next day. And a lot of good stuff here. Also super important to note about DTS AutoStage and with the metrics, everything that we're doing here is completely free. There is no cost to participate in DTS AutoStage, and there is no cost to get access to metrics that we're showing here. And these are live metrics. Important also to note that this is only a subset of the cars in the market. It's only the vehicles that we've launched with that are able to deliver some of these metrics. But it's still the first time ever in the world where broadcasters have the opportunity to see real-time metrics coming from the vehicle for over-the-air listening in their markets, and at a cost of nothing. We're also able to show listeners or able to show stations the listening pattern or the flow of listening on a given day. Looking at yesterday, what did your listening look like on that day? Where did your listening start to pick up? Where were the peaks? Where were the valleys? Where did it completely tail off on the given day for your listening? And then looking at how that averages over, on a typical Tuesday or a typical Monday, things like that. But being able to see where your listening is kind of coming from or throughout the day, where is that listening happening the most, and being able to see some of that data. Also being able to see heat maps, see where your listeners are when they're tuning into your station. Where are they centrally located in your market? Now, this is just a screenshot, obviously, that I captured a little bit before here, but you can zoom in a little bit more and see here. But being able to go into a little bit more detail of your market and where are your listeners when they're tuning into your station in the market? Where are they? Are they downtown? Are they on the outskirts? What are the big highways where your listeners are traveling and things like that? But being able to start getting some new insights into where your over-the-air broadcast radio listening is coming from inside of the vehicle. And then top charts. Top charts are where we're able to actually show what were the most listened to tracks that your station played on a given week. Being able to see when what top songs were actually listened to, when that song was played, what actually had a pair of ears behind those songs, and what actually kept them listening, right? You know, they listened for 30 seconds or longer, and seeing the songs that were kind of, you know, fan favorites or just in general that actually had the most listened to week over week. And I think over time, you know, you'll see this expand too in some of these metrics. As I said before, we launched these metrics at the end of March, so it's still very early for the rollout of this. I mean, we're only, you know, 4 or 5 months into the rollout of our metrics. But a lot of really, really great things that people are broadcasters are able to start seeing with what's going on. The metrics obviously are solely dependent on the vehicles on the road in the market. And there is no rhyme or reason for size of the market if you have the metrics or not. If you've got radios in the market that have DTS AutoStage, they're providing metrics. And I've seen medium-sized markets have stronger metrics than large markets, or small markets stronger than larger markets. So it really truly just depends on the vehicles that are driven inside of that market. We also don't have demographic data, right? So this follows all of the GDPR, California privacy laws, all of that sort of those data protection laws that exist. This is all fully compliant with it. So I can't tell you that it's Chad's Mercedes or Juan's Kia, right? We can just show you that these are listening sessions that are occurring in your market. And I think over time, as we roll out additional features and other services and things like that, you'll start to see some really, really great things coming, and you'll start to see these metrics improve and start to get to be a little bit more possibly representative of your market. Also important to note that these metrics shouldn't be replaced. Shouldn't replace tools that you're using today, right? There's all sorts of data sets that we all have, you know, to understand our audience, whether it's Nielsen, whether it's digital metrics, whether it's our app metrics, event metrics, whatever sort of metrics we have to tell our story, your story about your listeners. This is just, in our opinion, one of those tools in the toolbox where this hopefully gives you a better understanding or more insight into your listeners inside of the vehicle, and just helps you to tell that kind of holistic story around your listeners and where they are in the market. And again, completely free. Over time, we'll also, like I said, we'll continue to improve on that. We'll add elements, we'll add services, and improve on those metrics. That sort of brings me to the end. So the shameless plug here on what we're doing is, again, DTS AutoStage. It is completely free, as I mentioned. If you want to get your station set up, you can scan this QR code. It'll take you to the link to get your station set up. Or you can reach out to me directly on how to get your stations onboarded into DTS AutoStage. At the end of the day, what I hope you take from this, 30 so minutes of discussion around this, and open any questions if anybody has anything that they want to shoot over. Hopefully you walk away with understanding that there are a lot of exciting things going on in the car. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, there obviously are a lot of challenges as well for broadcast radio in the car. The reality is, if done right, and we believe it is being done right, there is a lot of opportunity for radio in the car. By pairing broadcast radio, using the efficiency, the reliability, and the localness of it, and the free aspect of radio, using that with that internet connection in the car, and the unique content, obviously, and the great content and compelling content angle of broadcast radio in the car, that with the internet connection is something that we believe is a magic mix, and is something that can truly make radio even more exciting in the car and help to create its longevity inside of the vehicle. And so hopefully something that you'll either look into a little bit more and just see what's going on, or, sign up if you're interested in that sort of thing. There's a question coming in. Is an HD transmitter required for this? That's a great question, Dale. It is not required for this. So arguably, if you're not HD, even more so, the reason you should participate in this, because in Tesla, in the Hyundai, in the Kias, you can't send your station logo to those vehicles over an analog broadcast. But if you sign up for AutoStage, we're able to deliver those station logos to that vehicle. So again, arguably, this is the opportunity that you have, especially if you're analog, because there's not more. I mean, we'd love for you to be HD. Obviously, at Xperi, that would be a great thing to have that, and not to discredit HD also, because HD is on 100 million cars across the market, across the country. And, by going HD and utilizing artist experience and those other features, you have the ability to impact the over-the-air experience inside of the car and how your listeners engage with your content. So you can impact it today on quite a few cars on the road. So it's definitely something to be considered, but I understand it if it's not. But yeah, it is 100% not required. But AutoStage does support AM, analog AM, digital AM, analog FM, digital FM, as well as HD2, HD3, and HD4. And also translators and boosters. Forgot about those, including translators and boosters. Really anywhere that an over-the-air signal can be received in a vehicle, those are all supported under DTS AutoStage. That's about all I've got, Chad. I don't know if there are any other questions or thoughts, but we can, yeah.
If there are questions, as Juan mentioned, just type it in the chat there before we get going. Juan, someone did ask me a little while ago about the hybrid solution. And from a linear standpoint, how does it work? The software, I assume, senses the signal's getting weak. Does it automatically move over? Or is there a prompt that says, do you want to move over? And you can say yes or no, and stay with, because you may want to stay with that weak signal for a while.
You may want to stay with that weak signal.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that work?
No, that's a good point. So a lot of vehicles today have multiple tuners inside of the car. If you see a station list in the car, it's got a second tuner. And sometimes 3 tuners. It really just depends on the vehicle. In this case, what's happening is there's a second tuner inside the car, and it's measuring the signal strength. And when it hits that threshold that's been defined by Mercedes, it will then prompt you to switch over to the stream. If we have your streaming link. If we don't have your streaming link, a streaming link won't be provided, but it will prompt if you want to switch over to the stream. And as the user, you have the ability to switch over to the stream. You have to hit yes to accept to go over to the stream. Part of the reason that is done is because the time delay between broadcast and IP can sometimes be a little bit much. Now, the hope is by having that action appear, that is enough time to kind of buffer and to fix that little bit of a time gap, and that transition isn't too rough. To be honest, it's not perfect, right? I mean, you'll still have a little bit of a hiccup there, but it's a problem that a lot of groups are trying to figure out. We're working on it. A bunch of groups around the world are trying to figure this out. It's not an easy solution, especially when you look at how many radio stations in the US, but then also globally. How do you create something that works for everybody? Because there's time delays, it varies from one station to another. And so a lot of work's being done around it, but it's good enough for Mercedes to have launched with it. And so, it is a good enough experience that it's not bad. There was something in here about control over their information. Yeah, so that's a good point of note. So the goal here of stations participating in the system is that you have the ability to manage all of your metadata that's delivered to the vehicle. You change formats, you change logos. It's seasonal time, so you're updating your Christmas logo. You have the ability to go in and manage all of that data. That you have control over it. You have the ability to make changes, and it directly impacts the vehicles in the market. Reality is, we probably have metadata for most of the member stations here and just in general of broadcasters around the world. To get to a launch phase, we had to aggregate metadata globally. But where we are today is that we want to give control over to the stations, so that they have the ability to update it. And what we've learned over time as we started this aggregation is that these third-party sources are not always correct. They can be incorrect. And what truer source of what's actually going on at a station than the station itself? They are the truest source. And so that's the goal of what we're doing. And the hope is that to give access to stations. There's another question here about being able to send advertiser information to the screen simultaneous with on-air spots. Can you send advertiser logos? So I didn't cover that earlier. A lot of discussions around that and how we can improve advertising and how we can create elements of improved advertising for radio in the car. If you are a digital station today, you can send your client logos, via third-party services, right? Depending on the group or what you're using, you have the ability to pair client logos with the advertisements and send the client logo over HD, and do it that way. If you're analog, there's no way to do that today. So under AutoStage, anything you send over broadcast takes priority or precedence over IP. So that would carry through if you're doing it over broadcast. But to the point of lyrics and those other services, there's a lot of talk and discussion around, and we're discussions and working with the RAB as well around what other things could we do to enhance radio advertising? How else can we improve on radio advertising? If we know that we're listening to a Lowe's commercial or a Home Depot commercial or Juan's Flores commercial, and we have that internet connection now, what else could we do? If we hear Juan's Flores commercial, could there be, a navigation button to take me to the nearest or take me to Juan's Flores, that sort of thing, and then have those metrics to be able to send back to the client. So the station could then absorb those sorts of details and understand the actions that are done. Or maybe there's a special coupon that could be sent out, right? I'm driving, my phone is paired. There's a special coupon for my florist that comes up. I could voice command, text me the coupon, and the coupon could be sent directly to my phone. And, having some of those metrics to be able to share back from a broadcast side to the client. Dynamic ad insertion, right? You've got premium inventory, you could prioritize it based off of vehicle location, right? You're 5 miles within a Home Depot, the Home Depot ad gets inserted, where you say it should, sort of thing. So, and that's, again, and those are all future thinking, right? Don't take that as like you can be done today. These are just kind of ideas that are going around that we're thinking through. And that's not even all of them, right? I'm sure, John, you could probably come up with 20 other ideas around what else we could do with radio advertising in the car to make it even more exciting or engaging and add, huge value to the advertising side of it. So a lot of work going on in that space. And I think, more to come. And again, the opportunity, right? I kind of bring it a full circle, right? The connectivity is not something to be scared about. It's not something to, to be, losing sleep over. There's a lot of fun stuff ahead for it. And we're very excited about the opportunity. Looks like, I think those are it. And unless there's any others, then I'm good with calling it here, chat, or John's flowing them in here. We've got iHeart, Cumulus, Hubbard, or Odyssey signed up as companies as of yet to AutoStage. Yes, that's an easy question. Yes to all. All of them are covered. So all of the major groups are on board. We've got a lot of independents. Zimmer, I know that's a potentially a local favorite or a fan favorite in Missouri. Zimmer's on board. I'm sure we've got more. I'm not just singling them out. It's just the one I know off the top of my mind in Missouri. But we've got tens of thousands signed up. Here in the States, all the major medium-sized groups you can think of are pretty much on board. And we've got small mom and pop independents on board, in smaller markets. So it truly runs the gamut of stations that are participating. But
so those local market managers who just learned from you, Juan, that their companies are signed up, their next question is probably, how do I get my station as a part of this?
how do I get to see?
And the answer is what?
The answer is talk to your management about it. So so for some of these larger groups, we've done all the technical work to get integrated into it, and so their stations are right. iHeart, the Odysseys, Hubbards, Cumuluses, all of the world are already on board. How access is given is determined internally. But if you reach out, to me, I can try to see if I can help you independently of each of these groups and tell you who we might be working with or who might be the point you might want to try to reach out to. But definitely something, the data is there, especially for these groups, because everything's done. The data is already there. The screenshots are that I showed earlier today are from a station. I think they're a Cumulus station in Jefferson City. So they're real data that's coming into the market. And it's all live, so it's just a matter of getting access to it. But yeah, for sure, John, reach out, to myself, or reach out to Chad, and Chad can connect us, and we can try to help you navigate that or get you access to it. But definitely something that's, I think, is interesting to see if you can.
Well, thanks for everyone's time for taking this 45 minutes to be a part of this. Juan, we appreciate your time and filling in the blank and answering a lot of questions we had today. Juan will send me the link. So if you have people on your teams that want to see this, we'll get that sent out through the MBA email probably later today.
Yeah, for sure. And one more, John came in with another one real quick. I'll cover this one. So he's got a new Ford and wanting to know about artist experience, the album data to the screen. His new Ford doesn't have it. We've been working really hard on that. It is obviously not available from Ford's decision. For some reason, they haven't moved the needle on that. What I would encourage you to do, John, and this is for any broadcaster, I tell this 1,000 times a day if I can, go to Ford.com and fill out their customer feedback form, and let them know, hey, my spouse's car has artwork with the radio, but my new Ford doesn't have it, or whatever it is. Because that feedback is super valuable for radio, period. It's helpful for HD radio, but also just in general, it's helpful for radio because they're not hearing feedback about the implementation of radio inside of the car. So anything that we can do as an industry to help share that feedback about radio inside of the car is super, super important. If you buy your new Ford and you, this is a real example I had where I had a Honda, and on my way home from the office, I had an HD2 I could barely listen to. Going into little down the hills, up the hills, I would lose that HD2. The same exact drive home in my new VW, I could listen to it crystal clear. I had a great reception of it, could listen to it the entire way. There was just a better antenna and a better better work done on that finessing of the antenna in the car. And so, I left that feedback on Honda's customer, report thing, right? Letting them know that, hey, I was a customer, went to a different brand, and there's already a huge difference, right? But anything that we can do as an industry to help raise the visibility for radio is super, super important. So I'd encourage you to just go to the Ford customer feedback. And I try to avoid dealerships on that sort of feedback because it gets lost in translation. It typically will never make it back to the product planners. But the customer supports through the automakers directly will do that. But yeah, unfortunately not as of yet, but it's not that we're not working on it. It comes down to a decision by them. But that's a great question, John. But yeah, so Chad, I appreciate the time, appreciate the feedback and the questions, and you know how to get a hold of me, and everyone's got my contact info here. Feel free to reach out, and if you ever want to talk about anything we're doing, just reach out.
Thanks, Juan. Appreciate it. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Chad. Have a good one, everybody.